Honda's superbike engine CB1000 Hornet blew us away at its world launch. It's fast, fine handling and full of electronics, but the price blows its competition into the weeds.
And if these don't get your blood pumping, then you need to go and see a doctor. But where does the Hornet fit in with all these bikes? Is this bike all hype? And here it is. Here is the standard CB1000 Hornet. This costs £8,999, which is incredible value. Now, this is basically a superbike in disguise. So it's got a Honda Fireblade engine from 2017. So that's when the Fireblade started getting quite powerful, and the original Blade engine had 189 bhp. This has got 150 horsepower. It's got some slightly lower spec engine internals, but it's tuned for kind of more mid-range and more real-world performance. So it's got a very special engine. It's got lots of electronics. They're not lean sensitive, but they still work really well. And it's mounted in quite a special chassis. So when you walk around this bike, you know, there's that term called a UJM, Universal Japanese Motorcycle, which is a bit of a derogatory term really. It's a bit of a mean term that people would call these bikes. And it kind of implied that they're cheap and cheerful. They kind of did the job okay, but they were nothing special. If you look around this bike, it still is kind of a UJM. There isn't anything that special about it. It's got a steel frame. It's got quite basic components, but the joy of this bike and the genius of this bike is that the Honda development team have made this chassis superb. It's really well balanced in a way that a lot of Japanese nakeds just simply aren't. And that's what makes this bike so special. It handles beautifully. You know, if you push it very hard, you can get it out of shape. The brakes are really good. Again, you know, you can find the limit of them. The electronics are great. You can bump into those as well. But working as a package, it's really hard to fault, especially for the money. You've got to keep going back to that price, £9,000 for this bike. And you've got to kind of ask yourself why it's so cheap. The simple answer is, I don't know. I can't see any cost cutting anywhere. So this particular bike has been used as a long-term test bike for our sister publication, Ride Magazine. It's done loads of group tests. It's been ridden through the winter in a lot of salt, and kind of around the edges is a little bit dog-eared. You know, just the way the pipe has kind of faded, and you know, it doesn't look pristine anymore. But given that it has been ridden through the salt and cleaned lots of times and used and abused by people that don't actually own the bike, I think it's kind of stood out quite well. And of course, if you own this bike and you spent your hard-earned on it, you probably wouldn't abuse it in the same way. It's made in Japan as well. So, you know, how Honda have done this is just a bit of a head scratcher, but I'm glad they have. And kind of part of me thinks that the reason Honda have been so canny with the price is the emergence of the Chinese manufacturers. You know, before Honda would have competed with fellow Japanese or Europeans, but now they've really got to tighten their belts because the Chinese manufacturers are coming and they're producing really good bikes. So of course, this isn't the only Honda Hornet there is. I have only ridden this a few times, but I've ridden this one a lot. This is the bike we rode at the world launch. This is the Honda Hornet SP. And this is kind of the reason we all got so giddy about the bike at the launch. Was it launch fever where we all got carried away? No, it's a fantastic bike. I think it looks great. Looks like the old JPS racing cars. But the main difference is that it's got an Öhlins rear shock. It's got Brembo Stylimer calipers. It's got an up and down quick shifter. And you can have all of that for just £1,000 more. So this bike is £9,999, which is an absolute bargain. So it's £1,000 more. Is it worth it? I think it is, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with the base model Hornet, but the Öhlins suspension just gives it a slightly plusher ride. It gives you a wider range of adjustment. It gives the bike a nice bit of composure, a nice bit of stability. To be honest, The brakes don't make a lot of difference. There's not a major difference in kind of feel or power. You know, we've said a lot of the times that Japanese ABS kind of robs the hardware of its natural power. So in terms of outright braking performance, there isn't a lot in it. And of course, having an up and down quick shifter just makes the job a lot smoother as well. Both bikes come on the same tyres. For a bike that's cost under £10,000, negligible difference on PCP, there's almost no point in Honda making that bike. I think they should all be these, but you've got the choice. If price really is a concern, then you go for the base model. But I think most people who have ridden both bikes would go for this one all day long, especially as it's not that much more expensive. The other thing is, does your £1,000 make this bike go any faster? Well, the one thing this bike does have is another 5 brake horsepower over that one. So this makes 155 bhp because it's got a different exhaust can and it's got an exhaust valve in it as well, just to keep the mid-range. In actual fact, we dyno both of these bikes, and this does make more power, as Honda says, but right in the mid-range, between 5,000 and 6,000 RPM, the standard one actually makes slightly more power, which is quite interesting. But to find out how all of that actually plays out in the real world, let's do a little drag race between the two of them. This head-to-head is a bit of fun, with no particular science behind it. But it's interesting to see how the SP edges out the standard Hornet in a straight line. Just. Its extra 5 bhp helps, as does the stiffer rear shock, which makes it less wheelie prone under hard acceleration. But there's very little in it for your extra £1,000, unlike this next bike. So the bike that's closest to the Honda Hornet, on paper at least, is this, the Suzuki GSX-S1000. So there's a lot of similarities here. Inline 4 engine, 1000cc, derived from a superbike. So this engine started life in the GSX-R1000, the K5, the Icon. That had 178 bhp back in the day. But this bike's got 150, so it's gone through the same changes that this bike has gone through. More mid-range, more kind of usable power. They weigh almost the same. Probably this is a tiny bit lighter, 211, 212 kilos. Make almost the same amount of torque, 78, 79 pound-foot. And to ride, they're actually quite different. The good points of the Suzuki is that it feels a little bit more of a substantial bike. It's a little bit bigger, the bars are a bit wider, it's got a little bit more girth to it. The finishing is slightly better than the Honda, and as it should be, because it's more expensive. So Suzuki have actually dropped the price of this bike by £1,000 to bring it closer to the Honda, but it's still £2,000 more expensive. So the big question is it £2,000 better? Well, the answer is no. The engine character is a little bit different to this. It's a bit gruntier because the donor engine is a long stroke engine from the old GSX-R. This blade engine is a lot shorter stroke, so it's much easier to kind of gather pace on this without having to work the motor so hard. But the chassis isn't as refined. It hasn't got the balance that the Hornet's got, which is what makes this so good, which is what makes everyone go wow when they ride it. The suspension's a little bit unrefined, a little bit crashy, and a little bit fussy, and you just don't get the same kind of fluid feeling when you're riding the Suzuki as you do the Honda. So unfortunately, the Honda beats the Suzuki hands down. The Hornet is so impressive you could almost call it a super naked. But how does it compare to one of the most exciting of the breed? There's no denying this is a very fast bike. 150 brake horsepower in something that feels so light is always going to be fun. And that's one of the things that really impressed us at the launch, was just how much fun it was and how it's a natural born wheelie bike as well. But when you're talking about fun nakeds, and even fun super nakeds, up there with super naked royalties like KTM Super Dukes, the MT-10 is probably one of the most fun nakeds you can buy of any motorcycle in the world. So again, this has got very similar DNA to the Honda and the Suzuki. It's got a superbike engine, so this has got a retuned R1 engine which made 196 bhp back in the day. This is the 2015 engine this is based on. It now makes 164, so it's already on the front foot. It makes more power than the others. It's got kind of an R1 chassis as well, where the other bikes have got their own chassis. And this latest model, which is the 2022 onwards model, has really got the kitchen sink thrown at it when it comes to electronics. So like the other bikes, it's got traction control, wheelie control and ABS and all the rest of it, but this has got an IMU and that facilitates lean sensitive rider aids. It's got cruise control. The dash is probably the only disappointment on the whole bike. It's very small, it's very old school, almost like a postage stamp compared to the others. But it is just phenomenal to ride, and the reason is because of this engine. This engine, this cross-plane crank 1000cc engine, is one of the kind of natural wonders of the motorcycle world. Easily one of the best engines there is. The sound of it, it kind of sounds like a cross between a V-twin and a V4. It's very gravelly, very growly, but despite its kind of the meat of the sound of it, it feels like an electric motor, it's so smooth. When you open the throttle at normal road speeds, seriously, this feels like it's got twice the amount of power of the other bikes. Now, that might be something to do with the cross-plane crank engine, that might be something to do with the relationship, it's ride-by-wire, with how much actual power you get when you open the throttle. Maybe you get more than you think, but whatever way you slice it, it's just incredible. And because the engine's so friendly, it makes this bike fast around the track. The superpower of this bike and the R1 is how it gets from the apex to the exit of the corner so quickly and so easily, not with any rider aids even. It's just got so much natural grip. But it also means it's just an amazing fun bike, a wheelie bike. But the price. So it's easy to wax lyrical about this. It's really well finished as well, probably the best finished here. It's expensive. Yamaha have shaved £2,000 off this bike, but it's still £3,000 more than the standard Honda Hornet. Is it worth £3,000 more? Yes, definitely, I'm not going to lie. But if you haven't got 12 odd grand to spend on this bike, the Honda Hornet is still the one to go for, and it's still 80–90% as fun as this. But if you want the ultimate in super naked fun, you got to have the Yamaha.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what an extra 14 brake horsepower and the might of a cross-plane crank looks like.
These bikes have been a lot of fun to ride, and so they should be. They're basically super bikes wrapped in naked chassis. And if these don't get your blood pumping, then you need to go and see a doctor. But where does the Hornet fit in with all these bikes? Is this bike all hype? Definitely not. This is a fantastic motorcycle in its own right. Very well balanced, very fast, like we said. Fantastic brakes, lots of electronics, lots of toys, a colour dash, but all for £8,999. The value is incredible, and that is why we've been raving about it, and anyone who's ridden this bike has raved about it too. Compared to the others here, well, the SP version, it's £1,000 more. Is it worth £1,000 more? Absolutely. You know, with the drag racing, it really depends who's riding the bike, the conditions and all the rest of it. But in the real world, a 5 brake horsepower difference doesn't really make a lot of odds. But the reason you'd spend a little bit more money on this bike is just the way it's finished. Those fancy brakes, the fancy suspension would just make the owning experience that little bit nicer. So yeah, I'd go for the SP version all day long of all of these bikes. Money no object, it's got to be the Yamaha. That's a crazy bike. It's well finished, it's got better electronics, it's got cruise control, it's got the best engine note, it's the easiest to ride, it's the fastest, it's the most fun. It's just tick, 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 tick. But you're starting to get into the realms of spending quite a lot of money, even though Yamaha have reduced the price by £2,000. but if you've got the money, that is definitely a good bike, and even a consideration over a European Super Naked. And then you've got the Suzuki. If the Suzuki was the same price as the Honda, then you could probably come up with some fors and againsts, because there isn't really a lot of difference in the real world. The Honda's just that little bit more refined and that little bit better balanced. The Suzuki is slightly nicer finish and it's slightly more substantial, like we said earlier, but it's not worth £2,000 more, unfortunately. So sorry, Suzuki, but still a great bike and still got that magnificent K5 GSX-S1000 engine. So that's the end of our tests. The Honda Hornet, whichever flavour you want, SP or standard, has just blown us away, more for its value for money, and that's really what's missing nowadays in a lot of new bikes. They're just so expensive, and Honda have proved, you know, you can really have your cake and eat it with a new Hornet. So that's it for the test. Thank you very much for watching, and look out for more videos like this coming very soon. Iconic GSX-S1000 K5 engine.